Welcome back. In the second module, I want to talk more about research in the social determinants of health. In the earlier module, I tried to give you a framework of what we're all about in this course, and now I want to dig in a little bit deeper. First, let's ask the fundamental question. What causes disease? One of my favorite people in the world, Ichiro Kawachi from Harvard University, has this great story. He'll ask, what causes a headache? Well, a headache is not caused by a lack of aspirin, right? So one can use an aspirin to hopefully remedy a headache, but the headache itself is not caused by that lack of aspirin. It might be dehydration, you might have got a bonk on the head, but the aspirin is different than the cause. And this might be something we want to think about as we go forward. We can understand the causes of our disease, but sometimes the remedy is yet something entirely different. And so as we think about the social determinants of health, we want to keep in mind that sometimes the cause is critical and sometimes the remedy is different and more critical. So when I teach these kinds of things to my students, we might have a broad framework of what's causing disease. And of course, there's many answers. For some people, they might say God or some higher being. This is historically, throughout the more recent episodes of humankind, the general answer. It's not in the scientific framework, we'll just bracket that for now. From there, we might think of germs. Germs cause disease. Maybe individual choice or behavior. I smoke cigarettes, I ran marathons. Whatever I'm doing, one's choice, food we eat. But there's also social forces, global market forces, social norms, discrimination, policy, government efforts, and government failures. All of these things can be sort of lumped into this idea of social forces. So what causes disease? My answer is yes, all of these things. And it's a matter of perspective on how we want to understand them. One can think of, in this case, disease as that big D. And there are things that are proximal or immediate causes of those disease, such as genetics, or maybe a bacteria that gets in your bloodstream, physiology, molecular biology. All these things clearly matter, and we're silly if we reject the biophysical facts of Mother Nature and our own human existence. But we can ask, where do the germs come from? Where does this molecular biological change come from, this poison I might have eaten? That might come from behavior, lifestyle choices, other things at an individual level. And that's an important explanation for disease as well. I smoked cigarettes, I ran marathons, I did this, I didn't do that. All kinds of explanations at the personal level. We might also ask, well, why did I behave this way? Why did I smoke cigarettes or run marathons, whatever else? Maybe there's social norms and forces around this. If I live in, say, Boulder, Colorado, I'm likely to run marathons if I have enough, money to free myself to do that. If I watch lots of television advertising, I might have been influenced by social market forces to smoke cigarettes as a young person. So what you can see here is more of a chain, a more of sort of an upstream and downstream framework. And I think this is important to understand as we go forward collectively together. That disease or health is caused by all of these things. They just come in a pattern. So we can talk about immediate or proximal causes of disease. I fell off my bicycle, bonked my head, and had a traumatic brain injury, or hopefully nothing bad at all. It's also lifestyle, behavioral choices. It's also social forces, markets, norms, sexism, racism, all the things we might think as fundamental or upstream causes of disease. The answer is yes to all of these things, and where we focus our attention is a matter of choice. We ought not privilege one or over the other. We also should not probably discount pure physiological, pure genetics. These things can matter for certain diseases, certain outcomes, but not all. So where we focus might be best said to be where we can get the most traction. In an action research framework, that action or traction might be what we're after in our work on the IRL program. Let me offer a little history from my field of epidemiology to hopefully solidify these points? Well, the history of modern epidemiology begins in earnest around the 1820s and in Western Europe and America anyway. And at this time, there were cholera epidemics sort of raging through Asia and coming over into Western Europe and even into America, the United States. Cholera, as you might know, today we know, is caused by a bacteria, but at the time no one knew what was causing this rather horrific condition where one sort of gets diarrhea so acutely they die. It's that bad. And so it's terrifying populations where 30, 40, 50,000 people at a shot are dying from cholera epidemic. So what caused this? Well, there's lots of theories of the day. Some people said, as I mentioned, this is God's will or people were sinning, and that very well may be true, but that's not in the scientific framework. Others would say this miasma. And this wasn't a silly idea. At the time of the Industrial Revolution, there was lots of rot, there was lots of sort of insufficient public health infrastructure for sewage and water and cleanliness in urban areas. And so urban areas were extensively polluted. And with this pollution came a horrible smell. And so where there was more smell, there was more disease. And people called this the miasma, to be simple. Others seriously wondered if it was elevation. Now think about this for a minute. People at higher elevations on top of the hill of a city were less sick, less prone to being ill than people down in the lower parts of the city. So elevation is correlated with one's risk of, in this case, cholera and death. That's an interesting social phenomenon, right? Because people at the top of the hill can, if you will, afford to be at the top of the hill. And if you will, the working folks, those with less advantage in life, were at the bottom of the hill and suffered more, not only socioeconomically, but also in terms of illness. There was also thoughts of contagion, but it wasn't quite clear yet what contagion meant. So we have these competing theories of what's causing these horrific cholera epidemics in the 1830s and 50s. Well, at the time, along comes an English physician named Jon Snow. You can see him there. I always think he's so handsome with those chops. Maybe I should grow something like that. So Jon Snow was born in 1813 and lived to about 1860. And he was a physician interested in gas and interested in anesthesia. So since he understood gas, he was very skeptical of this miasma theory of disease. And to simplify the story greatly, here's a little way to think about it. Well, here's a map of London at the time, and I hope the graphic shows up. You can see sort of a line in the upper third of that graph. That's not a highway, that's the Thames River. And it's going from my left to right. And you can see two areas sort of highlighted, one in a greenish blue, one in a reddish pink. And those two areas are sort of where two water companies were serving the public through river water. I'm simplifying here to make the point. You can see one area perhaps at the sort of top center of that graphic where there's a neighborhood that has both water companies serving the public. So in one house, water from company A, and the other house, water from company B. But the houses are right next to each other, people at the same elevation, they're exposed to the same amount of noxious stink, and everything else about the area in terms of sin or anything else you want is identical. What Jon Snow figured out, with some help, was that people getting, to be simple, water from company A were getting sick, and people from water company B were not getting sick. Therefore, he surmised there's something in the water. He could not yet see the cholera vibrio bacteria, but he inferred that that's where it must be. This was the rise of germ theory in modern epidemiology, and as we understand germ theory today, it's why we wash our hands and do other things to stay clean. This is in the 1850s. But if you notice, one of the interesting things about this graphic is that there's two water companies. Well, one water company was taking their water upstream, clean water. The other water company was taking their water downstream, illegally, dirty water. So while it's true that the cholera bacteria was causing the cholera epidemic due to dirty water, it's also true that the rise of modern epidemiology could have also been told as a story of modern corporate malfeasance, breaking the rules to make extra profit. Yet that's not how we understood it. We understood it as a purely biological phenomena and not a social phenomena. And so this had great implications. Some great quotes here. Not surprisingly, the focus became disease in cases, not disease agentic people in social institutions. The cause of the causes was not entertained. That is, okay, a bacteria is causing the infection, but where does the bacteria come from and why these people and not those people? And then, as Hamlin wrote, Christopher Hamlin, one of my favorite medical historians, a political medicine with a status equal to political economy failed to develop. The public health field, along with medicine more generally, achieved significant autonomy. Medicine got autonomy, but it did so by sacrificing the ability to speak with authority on social issues, such as income inequality, such as people living on top of the hill and at the bottom of the hill, such as all kinds of discrimination. So the point here is that modern epidemiology's initial, uncritical adoption of Snow's myth that this whole thing is about germs foreclosed alternative explanations within epidemiology, and I would say foreclosed our discussion of the social determinants of health. That is why we're still struggling today to get back that conversation of the social forces, the economic forces, the racism, all these things we talk about together, that's really driving population health. Let me come back to some of the biology for a minute. This focus on germs in 1854 was probably a good thing. We needed to start washing hands. We needed to start cleaning up our urban environments. The question is that response, is that treatment or remedy, as we spoke of earlier with the aspirin, best today? That's the question you and I can ask each other. Let me offer just a few more thoughts on this. This framework that sometimes we call social epidemiology, I want to make it clear that we in the IRL are not the first to have these ideas, that this stuff goes back a long time, certainly to the Enlightenment, where great thinkers were thinking about social arrangements and the welfare, not so much the health, but the welfare of citizens. And the challenge here comes from great thinkers from history such as Thomas Hobbes, Hume, Adam Smith, Karl Marx, and so many others. The focus of this scholarship, of this effort to understand the haves and the have-nots, informed what we're working on today, the social determinants of health. More recently, Keynes, Galbraith, Milton Friedman, Friedrich Hayek, even when they disagree, we're still all working on what creates population welfare, what we might call population health. And whose population? Who exactly do we mean when we say all men are created equal and other such statements? Modern social scientists have tackled the same thing. The late Jim Coleman, Jim Heckman, Sam Bowles, Amartya Sen, philosophers, economists, political economists, these scholars have been informing what we're working on collectively today. The public health scholars Villamy, Virtue, Shedek, and Goldberg also worked on these ideas. Now we could go on and on. The point here is that what we're working on today, I'd like you to think as an extension of what's been working on for at least 200 years. And that framework is what we can use today.